Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to provide to you yet another video where Magnus Carlsen absolutely obliterates every single individual in his path, and we all relish and enjoy the brilliance. Throw me up on your iPad, smartphone, whatever it might be. Put me on the ledge in the shower so you listen to my voice as you wash your hair for the first time in a week. Folks, it's the last day of the Superbet Rapid and Blitz being held in Poland, and Magnus Carlsen yesterday got back to amazing form by absolutely buzzsawing his way through his opponents. And today, we will watch him do it once again. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your brief flight to Norway. Magnus begins with the Caro-Kann defense. A man after my own heart. I am the Magnus Carlsen spokesperson. So much so that the pinned comment in yesterday's video accused me of being a brown noser, which, for the adults watching, you understand what that means. And for the kids watching, it just means that I colored my nose with a crayon. That's what that means. But this was sensational stuff. Thank you, Magnus, for playing a Caro-Kann defense against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, one of the best players in the world. E5, advanced Caro. We have an H4, H5 system. This is the advanced variation. Tal looking for G4 and so on. Magnus doesn't let White have any fun. Bishop D3. And Magnus plays this in a way where he gives a check, and then he trades the queens right away. This is a very normal way to play this system. The critical move here that tests Black's entire position is the move pawn to E6. And the point is that if Black were to capture, it's not just that you are doubling your pawns, it's also the fact that your king is wide open. So what usually happens is Black takes the queen first, and then after White recaptures, then Black will play pawn takes E6. However, in this case, White plays pawn takes pawn check first, and then doubles. Normally, doubled pawns are bad. Against Magnus Carlsen, they are especially bad. And now here come the knights. But White has a lot of activity. White has good squares that they can exploit in their opponent's position. But, you know, for a human being, these positions are actually surprisingly difficult to play. Yes, the king is on G8. Yes, extremely passive. Definitely looks a little bit weird. Knight E6, pawn to G6. And Magnus plays bishop G7 with some pressure over here. He'd like to play knight F8, king F7. So what does MVL do? He just takes his bishop, puts his rook in the center, and plays the move pawn to G3. Pawn to G3 is a good move because you are enabling the movement of your knight, but it could be a little bit weakening. The knight on F3 could be under fire. But after rook E1, here the computer really wanted White to play bishop D2 and bishop B4, which is okay. More on that later. King to G2, A5. And Magnus is not in any way, shape, or form in this position equipped to call the shots. So far, it has been a very nice positional game from Maxime. I mean, he hasn't done anything revolutionary, but Maxime now plays pawn to B3. And this move gives Magnus the tiniest of ideas. So this is the position. Magnus is playing black. His opponent doesn't really want to allow A4, and also maybe wants to put his bishop on this diagonal, so he plays one pawn move. This one pawn move, without exaggeration, seals White's fate. One pawn move. One pawn move. You say, Levy, what are you talking about? That is not possible. Well, rook A8. You see, this is still going to happen. That's still going to happen. MVL really doesn't want that to happen, so he plays A4. But he already played B3. So by committing the pawn to A4, now that square is weak. Now this is a backwards pawn. Magnus plays rook E8, rook A6, and rook B6. One pawn move sealed the fate. One pawn move. Just one pawn move gave Magnus a target. And now White is trying to, there's a little bit of shuffling here. He brings his king back. Knight G5, knight comes here. You try to trade the knight off. This is White's best piece. Knight says no. King slides forward, defending the structure. And now, one pawn move decided the game, B5. Here comes Magnus. White only has 40 seconds on the clock. You get tangled in this web. It's like being in a grappling match with Khabib Nurmagomedov. UFC fans know what that means. If you're not a UFC fan, it's like being absolutely dominated by the king of the savannah. Rook E5. Magnus plays rook B8, just building behind that pawn. Just building to fight on the queen side. Take, Rook to b3, a square that was only weakened because white made a little bit of progress on that side of the board. Rook a3. MVL tries to break out with g4. Magnus consolidates. MVL continues to try to break in. Look at Magnus's king being protected by the horses. The horses will not let anything bad happen to the king. Now, Rook a7, defending the infiltration, the 7th ranked defense. You are still up a pawn. Rook a3 is on the way. Rook a2 possible in the future. Knight f6 check, and a fork. Maxime plays Rook b6, Knight f6 check, and the knight jumps from the edges of the castle to fork the 2 invading rooks. MVL loses his rook. MVL resigns the game. Amazing defense. Magnus was under pressure for 20 moves, and all he needed was the tiniest window to instigate on the queen side. Once b5 happened, you knew that it was a wrap. It was a wrap. Just move. You knew. Great game. But he doesn't always need to win positional grinds. Here he is playing the number 2 ranked player in Poland, Radoslav Wojtaszek. This is in English. Bishop g2, very complicated game, very tense game, but Magnus gets the 2 bishops. He has a very nice and comfortable position. He unpins himself. He's going to play b3, bishop g2, laser beaming down to that side of the board. All right, b3, bishop g5. Look at this. Look at all of his pieces. Beautifully positioned in the center of the board. Maybe he's going to play e4, f4, bring the rook, f5, g4, g5, h4, h5, h6, g6, take everything. h6. He comes back, pawn to f3, rook e1, and I told you, the pawns are going to come. All right? e4, a4, taking as much space as possible. All of this to say that he is building up this gigantic wall of pawns. He doesn't trade pieces. All right, sometimes we have a little bit of shuffling. He's finding his moment. The knight has rerouted to the center of the board. This game will likely end when the pawns come down and when the pieces come down and black's king will disintegrate. The knight has centralized and targets the bishop. Rook is centralized. Knight comes back. a5, knocking on the door. You take. Now I take the knight. You take. Knight f6 check. Hits the king. Hits the queen. Peekaboo, and when it's all said and done, the king side has absolutely disintegrated, but the queen cannot do battle on her own. So we have knight to, we have rook to d6, queen h4. Here come the pawns, and it is the pawns that are going to prove to be the difference makers, because the more pieces you trade, knight e1 takes, knight g2, all of this good stuff, the pawns will seal the fate of black's king. e5. Rook e2, good defense here, by the way. You may ask, rook e2. Well, if rook takes, then queen g4 would have been a fork, and this pawn wall still repels the black forces. King f2, knight d4. He rotates away, queen h6, and I told you a long time ago, folks, it would be the pawns. f5 doesn't just attack the knight. f5 also opens an attack to the rook, and on top of that, there is f6. If the knight moves, there is f6 and queen g7 mate to come in the future. Black is losing a devastating amount of material, and Magnus took a position where he had a dominant central clamp, he had the 2 bishops, he had far more mobile pawns, and he used this to his advantage to absolutely disintegrate the black position from all sides. I mean, the move pawn to a5 affects the king on g8. Magnus's ability to combine these 2 squares together is just sensational. a5 matters because if black plays knight takes, there's a fork, which means black has to play pawn takes. The move pawn takes completely destabilizes this knight, and now knight f6 check hits the king, and I mean, that's just... Oh my goodness! That is ridiculous. A clean win. Now, there were some games Magnus was challenged. This is not going to be the first time that Magnus is challenged in this video. He had games where he was sitting down to play the Sicilian defense, and his opponent wanted to take him out of the comfort zone. He wanted to take him into an Alpine Sicilian. Not just any Alpine Sicilian, an Alpine Sicilian where as early as move 12 and 13, bishop b5 is played. You can't take because of this. Let me take the knight. Let me take the bishop. Let me take the queen. This is the position. Folks, I woke up right around here. It was like early morning here. It was like 9. Not too early, actually. I'm just a lazy piece of garbage. This was the position. I looked at this position and I said, Magnus is going to win. Isn't that an incredible feeling? Like, just to know Magnus will find a way. He just will. It's ridiculous. Completely and utterly ridiculous. It's a 0.1 position. If anybody's better, it's white because there's 3 on 2. I mean, that's not true. It's equal. But I'm saying, like, if this is not played correctly, white is going to be better because white is going to create an outside pass pawn. Magnus plays f6. He plays this move to enable the movement of his bishop. Otherwise, bishop g7 would have been possible. Also, maybe he wants to play e5. White brings the king. Apparently an inaccuracy, by the way. Apparently it was better for Kirill Shevchenko to castle and put his rooks in the center rather than the king. Rook c8. Magnus brings his rook to the center. Rook d1, he brings his rook to the center. Both bishops slide out of the way. Rook c7. Why? Yes, potentially to offer a trade, but also to protect the 7th rank from invasion. a4, a very interesting committal pawn decision. Now, Magnus does not want to rush with b5 or a5 because he doesn't like making pawn moves unnecessarily, and Shevchenko plays a5. Now that one pawn move completely controls Magnus's queenside. In fact, if Magnus plays a move like rook c8, white is threatening to win the game here. How? This. Why? Infiltration. Why? I will remove your defender. And even if I don't do that, white is completely winning. Black is completely paralyzed. So Magnus knows that, and after a5, goes back. He just goes back. Rook a4. Shevchenko is calling the shots in this endgame. Bishop b6, take. Now it's rooks and bishops, dead equal position, Magnus down 20 seconds on the clock. What you are about to witness is pure magic. And as I said in yesterday's video, you cannot spell magic without M-A-G. King d7, e5, kicking out the rook. The king is centralized, but it's dead equal. King d3. Magnus pushes. Kirill protects against the advancement of the pawn. The king is centralized, but the rook slides out of the way, enabling the move c4 check. The rook slides out of the way, enabling c4 check. Here comes Magnus. Now a very big decision. Which of the white pawns should you move forward here to protect the invasion of the black pawns? Maybe none. Maybe it just goes back. Magnus plays h4, taking a little bit of space. Now we boot the king out of the position, and we play the move h3, covering against any advancement. Rook h6, rook e1. The rook goes back, the bishops dance. Now Shevchenko here makes a very committal decision. He does not need to play this next move. He could play the move pawn to b4, for example, but he sacrifices his bishop. And he correctly evaluates that after this f4, he is winning back the bishop. Rook d4, rook e5 check, king slides out of the way, and Magnus is going to win a pawn for his trouble, but here comes rook back to e2. Now, Shevchenko here had to be brave. He had to threaten the infiltration to the other side, and after rook f2, he needed to be cerebral enough to realize he ain't going back. You ain't going back and playing a king and pawn endgame. You might lose. You gotta be forward. You gotta be forward thinking. You gotta be brave. You gotta be brave. Excuse me, you have to give a check first, and then you have to be brave. Rook d7. You need to deflect the king from the defense of the g pawn, and then you need to go here. But Shevchenko backs up. And what you never want to do against Magnus is set off the smell of blood. Shevchenko was not bleeding at the board as far as I know. I didn't ask. I didn't see any images. Magnus is a shark. The second that you go backwards against Magnus Carlsen, it's over. g5. I'm not trying to do a Gaara of the Sand impression from Naruto. King b4. Here comes Magnus. Again, Shevchenko in this position needed to understand the concept of time. He does understand the concept of time. What you don't understand is having 20 seconds on the clock against Magnus Carlsen, and he's just won 12 of his last 14 games. Pawn to b4 is what was necessary, and even then, it's still a complete headache defending this position. He goes with his king. His king ventures out onto the scenic overlook on the highway. g4, take, king c5, g3, rook e8 infiltrating, rook f2 hunting down the remaining pawns. Those pawns are going to collapse, but it doesn't matter. The pawn is coming. According to the computer, Magnus could have played rook h2, and there was a cleaner way to convert this endgame. It wanted him to do it in a slightly different way. Like after the move rook h8, the computer wanted him to just go rook g2, rook h4, and king f3. Very difficult to understand all of these subtle details, but I think it's because you're winning the pawn. Magnus misses that because he has 29 seconds on the clock. He's trying to hunt him down. Again, Stockfish kind of kills the mystique of Magnus. It just sits there like, I'm 3,700. For a human, these positions are extremely difficult to defend. The pawn is going to queen. And Shevchenko resigned. He resigned because after the move rook to g8, there was rook to g4, and Magnus is queening. I told you, in this position, I knew that Magnus was going to win this game. What I did not know is how he was going to do it. The way he wins these games is completely utter. It's nonsensical. It just doesn't make any sense. Nonsensical doesn't make any sense. Yes, terrific. Terrific explanations. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. Next game. They weren't all like that, though. Ricard Report plays the Trumpowski. Folks, the next 2 games are sensational. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. It'd be really funny if an ad ran when I said that, but I mean, that would be very funny. Trumpowski opening from Ricard Report. Good development for both sides. This is the early starting position. Report played this in a very provocative way. He refused the trade of bishops by giving black the more powerful bishop like this. I don't know if I agree with that, but Report has a very deviant style of chess. He kind of does what he wants. So when he does it, he might win games, then it'll be brilliant. Sometimes the opposite. Knight e2, knight e4, we have a trade. And bishop takes e7 sets off one of the strangest tactical combinations I think I've ever seen in my life. Bishop takes bishop, knight takes d2. For sure, the best move in this position is king takes. Why? Because after this, your king is safe. You're going to go rook a e1, and you're going to castle, and it's like you just castle. There's nothing. But Report is a deviant man. And in this position, with both queens hanging, Report plays queen takes f7, which looks like an over-the-board mouse slip. But he sacrifices his queen to win the queen back. Here's the problem, though. Magnus does not need to take the bishop. It ain't checkers, bro. He just gets out. Now Report has to move his bishop, and in that time, Magnus takes the pawn. And not just the pawn, the integrity of the entire pawn structure is now compromised. Pawn to h4, knight back to c4, and it goes from bad to worse. As in this position, Report plays the move bishop to f4 and loses the game on the spot. He had to put his bishop on e5. But he puts the bishop here, and now a tactical sequence finishes the game. Knight a3, rook b2, take, take. The avalanche comes down, knight to b4. Report resigned. He resigned because if he takes, he loses his rook. He resigned because of this or this, it's a fork. And the move rook to d2 looks like it solves your problems. But after knight to d3, you lose anyway. Because if you play king to f1, knight takes f4, there is a pin and you cannot take me back. If knight to d3 and king d1, you will play knight takes f2 and win a rook for free. And if rook d2, knight d3, and you take, of course you lose. 20 moves, headshot, dead. And it all came down to the final game of this tournament. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces, Jan Krzysztof Duda with the black pieces. If JKD wins this game, he might win the tournament. He is a point behind Magnus. He needs to beat Magnus with the black pieces. What do you do if you have to defeat Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces? Step 1. Play a completely terrible opening. Why? Because terrible openings give advantages to your opponent, but they make them play on their own. So your opponent cannot force a draw. If you hand your opponent an advantage, they can't just force a draw. That's exactly what happens. A6. It's looking like a 5-year-old is playing this opening, but it's a necessity. Because if Duda played a main line, Magnus would have killed the game and he would have won the tournament. Step 2. Get your queen trapped in the center of the board. Magnus is now completely winning on move 9. Not only is he completely winning, Magnus is going to win a rook in the corner of the board. It's +2. Queen d4 looking for a queen trade. The game must be over. Duda plays b5. Now in this position, if Magnus had just played queen c5 check, followed by queen c7 and something like this, and just castled, he would win this game within 25 moves. The game would be over. But sometimes weird openings make you do slightly weird things. Magnus played a5, but all of a sudden, Duda was back in the game. Duda, with g5 on the board, is suddenly not even worse, wait a minute, is Magnus gonna lose the last game of the tournament and potentially the entire tournament? Rook a2, rook b8. Duda is fighting back like a madman. We have an endgame. It's rooks and bishops. One guy has 2 rooks, one guy has 2 bishops. Remember though, Duda has to win. Bishop f3 by Magnus, compromising his pawn structure, and now Duda plays b3. Look at Magnus's pawns. Tripled b pawns, doubled f pawns, and a loner h pawn. And he's down nearly 2 minutes on the clock. This is one of the worst pawn structures ever seen in human history. And it belongs to Magnus Carlsen. Normally, Magnus Carlsen is doing this to other people. Rook b6. The pawns are traded. Magnus is left with 2 bozos. All right? 2 folded up bicycles that cannot be unfolded. This is utterly ridiculous. Meanwhile, the man on the other side has an armada. He has a spaceship of pawns. They're all going to fall down the board. 1 pawn has fallen. Bishop to b6. Magnus is not playing this for a win. I just hope we are all on the same page. Now, of course, he has a mobile b pawn, but right now it's being well protected. But does Duda have it in his arsenal to simultaneously defend the endgame and now play it for a win as Magnus gets it down to bishop and 4 versus rook and 2? The only man that can win this game is named Jan Krzysztof Duda, and he is playing with the black pieces. And if he is able to win this game, he is going to win the tournament. Let's turn off the eval. We know that the evaluation is equal. Here we go. King f4, e5, bishop d4, bishop c5. Here come the pawns. Bishop d4. Magnus is down to his final pawn. The 3 pawns have arrived. Now, you will notice, I will turn this on just for a brief second. It's equal. King f4, e4. Down to your final 2 pawns. That's it. Can the bishop and the 2 pawns defeat Magnus? Magnus looking to defend as black is making forward progress. Bishop b4. The king is cut off, but the pawns, and you'll notice that white is threatening to sack. He's threatening to sacrifice. Rook a3, king b4. Uh-oh. Magnus has lost the game. Ladies and gentlemen, pawn to d3. The pawns have made it through. Young Krzysztof Duda is winning the game. The pawns have crossed the 3rd rank. Bishop to g3. The wrong direction. Apparently, Duda needed to go this way. He needed to get the bishop that way and play e3 as fast as possible. Why? Because the move bishop g3 allowed this move, and now you can't push the pawns as fast as possible. And after this, rook g4. And I am pinning you just in time. Okay, rook d8. You got the king in, but that's not what you need. We keep shuffling. Is there going to be another chance for Duda? King e3, king e5. We're nearing 100 moves. Magnus's king is feeling bold. Bishop f4, bishop d4. Is there anything Magnus might screw up? We've crossed 100 moves. We're shuffling back and forth. 110 moves we go. Duda looking for a break. Oh, wait, was it right here? Bishop b6 was winning. Because after rook e7, apparently bishop c5 and deflecting the king back, the rook back, and now pawn to e3. And apparently this is the winning setup. Why? Because white has to make a king move. If the rook goes away, it's e2 check. So because white has to make a king move after e3, like king to c1, you can get in here with the king and the pawn as fast as possible. One move on move 116, Duda's final chance. He misses it, the players shuffle, rook h6, 1 pawn has fallen. That's it. Magnus Carlsen wins this tournament. He did not lose a single game in the blitz portion. At some point, he won 8 games in a row. The GOAT is back. Now get out of here.